Hi, and welcome back to Not Your Average Breakdown podcast. I'm Claudia, and my co host Alex is here. How are you, Alex?
I'm good. How are you doing, Claudia?
Well, I am getting over a cold, but that's not holding me back, not holding back my excitement, Alex, because do you know why?
Why?
Tomorrow is Halloween, and it's one of my
Oh my
favorite
God.
holidays.
You are hanging out too much with our friend Allie, who is the queen of holidays and Halloween.
Well, I mean, just so that the people listening know, a little tidbit about Alex is she has no Halloween spirit and she does not decorate. And she judges you if you decorate. So, little fun fact about her, but your energy is not affecting my Halloween energy.
I decorate for Christmas, okay? I love Christmas and I always go crazy, but Halloween is, I just find it,
That's sad,
I,
Alex. I just want to
I
tell
don't
you
know.
it's sad. But I'm not letting you interrupt my energy about it.
Tell us what you're dressing up as.
Oh, okay. So I wasn't going to tell you because by the time this comes out, it's not going to be a secret anymore. But at work, we have like a little team and we're all going to be minions because we
Uh-huh.
basically are minions at work anyways. So it's going to be really fun. So yes, I am dressing up because I don't think there has been a Halloween that I haven't.
Is that what was in the package that I accidentally opened in your house? Amazon package?
Yes.
Like
Yes. Yep.
like minion glasses or something.
Yes, it was. Yes, exactly. Here's the thing. You open packages at my house at your own risk. You just don't know what's in them. So, you know what? Out of
Same.
all the things that you could have seen, I feel like a minion glasses were actually not that bad, Alex. So,
Yeah, that's actually pretty accurate.
yeah, you
Thank
thank
you
your
for
lucky
that.
stars. That's all it was.
Yeah, I already struggle with sleep,
Anyways,
so
no,
thanks for not
exactly.
ruining it for me. Yeah.
Exactly. No, you're safe. But anyways, besides Halloween, we do have another big day coming up for our country, which is why we're here, what we're doing here on this podcast this week. Election day is coming.
Yes, and the election day this year, 2023, is only for certain states. Not everybody is included. But next year, 2024, is our presidential election, which is one of the most important elections.
Yeah, and just so that you get to know us as we're doing this, normally in the past when this topic comes up, Alex looks like she wants to fight me, and she is small, but she's scary and intimidating. So when she has something to say about this topic, I usually listen a little extra hard because she is so passionate about it.
I feel like over the years, I yelled at you most for this
Yes, yeah, I
to
agree.
get you registered to vote. And then we definitely in 2020 had discussion about like going out to vote. You know, I don't care who you vote for, but I want you to vote because it is your right that you really have to exercise. And I will explain to you more in detail.
And again, that's what I appreciate about our conversations is that you're not trying to impose your agenda on me. You literally just want me to go out and vote for who I want. And you want me to be as far informed as possible. So this is a good topic to cover.
Yes, I really don't care what side of the aisle you are. I think that everybody should exercise the their right to vote equally, right? So if your vote counts no matter how you vote. So it is not my job to persuade you to one side or the other. That's on you. But that's why we have these discussions where you can make an educated decision or research the topic more. If you think that something I said, maybe you didn't get all the information, or maybe you're interested in learning more, that's why we have, these discussions. And that's why we decided to start this podcast in the first place, to share this conversation that we have with the rest of you guys.
And to be honest, my feelings before we talked about this was that, I couldn't make a difference. And I think that's where you've swayed me most, is obviously these conversations have changed that for me. So, I want everybody else to kind of feel what I felt when we talked about it. So,
So I am gonna start us off and tell you why we vote, right? Because that is like the biggest question, like why should I go out and vote, right?
yeah, why is it
So
important?
it is important because when the founding fathers were writing the Constitution, that is one thing that they wrote in, right? White men who were property owners, they were the only ones that were able to go and vote. And throughout the history, there were a couple of different amendments that extended those voting rights. So in 1870, the 15th Amendment extended voting rights to men of all races. We had a lot of African Americans living in this country, and they, throughout the history, did not have the same rights as us. They fought for their own rights, and that's how the 15th Amendment, was voted in. And then in 1920, Claudia, the 19th Amendment gave us rights as women to vote. So up until 1920, you and me were not allowed to vote. And I feel like that's also very important to highlight. And then
Yeah,
in
because that could easily be taken for granted because you think of everybody voting, but specifically for women, it hasn't been that long.
Absolutely. And it really, if you think about it, it's like 1920 was only, 100 years ago. So since, 1700s up until 1920, women of all races were not allowed to vote. And to be in, in today's age where a lot of people, a lot of women also don't want to go out to the polls and vote, it almost feels like we're going against everything that our predecessors fought for. The changes to the voting rights did not stop there in 1920, and they're actually still happening up to this day. So in 1964, the 24th Amendment allowed people to vote regardless of their tax status. So there was something before in the Constitution and in the amendments that was called poll tax, and pretty much people had to pay to go out and vote. And that really was not fair because it was targeting or excluding either low income communities or minorities who did not have money to pay to go out and onto the polls.
I had no idea about that.
Yep. So all this plays into what does really mean to vote. I feel like those are some of the questions that usually came out of the discussion that you and me had in the past. Like, oh, does my vote count? Do I like I don't know anything about
Yeah. Yeah.
voting.
How
I
does
don't
it
know
make a
any-
difference?
Absolutely. So voting, besides you exercising your constitutional right, voting gives you power to make decisions on the quality of their life, your family, your community, your children, your school districts. Everything gets impacted. It's not just choosing a president. And if you're concerned with issues such as affordable housing, economic justice, environmental protection, abortion, LGBTQ rights, immigration, any type of funding, you should go out and vote because that is what's on the line, right? If you want to get more funding for your community, if you have a higher turnout of voters, then you have a better chance of getting more funding for your community. And the other thing is everything in this country is funded by your taxpayer dollars, and so is the election. So the United States of America spends millions of dollars on voting. That is your money, so why wouldn't you have a say in it? You also get to decide how your taxes will be spent by the people who are elected. Okay? So that means that your county and your state or your town, anything local to you, you get to make a change, right? If you're voting in the people that you support, that you think align with your political agenda or with your personal values, your morals, whatever drives you, then you should vote for them because they're going to make those changes. And, if you go on social media, I'm going to give you like a good example. A lot of celebrities, when there's something happening in the country, they tell you, call your representatives. Did you ever see those
Yeah, I've
Instagram
heard that
videos?
before. Yeah, I've heard that before.
They're
I'm always
calling.
wondered, like, does that really work? I mean, do you even get through it? I mean, how does that, I don't know how that
Yes,
plays
and
out.
so they have lines like your state representatives, your local representatives, they do have lines open for you because you are their constituent, right? They support you, so they have to hear you out. And sometimes those phone calls matter. They matter because if enough people call and raise the issue with this representative, they can go back to Washington, D.C. and try to make those changes, right? If we're voting for something that it's going to impact the entire country or, a state, they might make a state legislation. But if it's something that's going to impact the entire country, we talked about in our first episode about Speaker of the House, right? We talked about the House and the Senate. So that is where they make that change. But that change happens when people express their opinions and their concerns and they want to see the change, right? We pressure the legislators to listen to our voice and make the change to benefit us. And that's the whole purpose of election, right? We're electing these people to represent our rights.
Right. Okay. And that's where, not just the presidential election is important because everyone else that you vote in also matters.
Yes, absolutely. And the polls usually suggest that more people go out and vote in the presidential elections. When we are electing the president, we are also electing, who is he or she going to choose for the Supreme Court justices? Who is he or she going to appoint? Secretary of the State and Department of Defense and all these high-ranking positions, right? But when you go out and vote, like in midterms and your local elections, you're choosing your own local legislators, people that will represent you, your county, your town, your state. And then they will bring up those issues and then represent you and your state in the House or the Senate or collectively called Congress. Right. So it is
Right. And
not
those
just
have the
choosing.
more, and sorry, but they have the more immediate impact on you, right? I mean, because it's literally where you live.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like people get discouraged to go out and vote for their local elections because they think the bigger impact is made on the federal level,
Yeah.
which is
Yep.
not always the case. Okay. I think that voting is important regardless, but it's also important to note that it is imperial that we go out and vote in every election that we are given the opportunity to do so.
Yeah. I mean, it really wasn't until you started talking about that I realized that there's a need to every election day to get out there and have your voice heard. How do you feel, somebody that, you have to identify what party you align with, right? I mean, someone like me, I hate the fact that, and people might be intimidated by this, that, okay, I have to claim a party, but I have to vote according to that party, but that you can go out there and you can choose to select the people that represent more of what your opinions are and how strongly you feel about certain topics. You don't have to vote so tunnel vision, right?
Correct. You don't have to vote 100% Democrat or 100% Republican. You also can vote independent. Okay. You don't have to vote one or the other. There is also an independent party here in the United States. But you can also mix and match. Okay. I cannot tell you how you should vote. Should you vote Democrat or blue or Republican or red? But you can do a very quick search if you're deciding to vote and you're just overwhelmed. And I feel like, so we have elections here in Virginia happening next week. And literally the ads are jumping out of my fridge at this point. And what those ads are doing is just they're bashing the other candidate. Okay,
This
so they're
is,
not
yeah,
really they're not telling you what they're going to do. They're just bashing the other side. And that is not good and it's counterproductive. Okay. So
it's so ugly. And one of the reasons why I don't like to participate in this stuff and I like to filter it out because it just gets dirty. I had an uncle that ran for mayor and actually won in our state and several times, but at the cost of our family because there was mudslinging and my uncle was constantly defending himself against just ludicrous claims and it was I just looked at the whole situation and I'm like, why is somebody choosing to do this when it's not just about the politics, it's about playing dirty.
it is a lot of the politics currently is about, like you said, playing dirty, right? It's not about politics anymore. It's about money. It's about lobbying. It's about everybody's personal agenda. But there are some people out there representing us who are true to their calling, right? They are serving their communities. And that's what this is about. That's what they're supposed to do. And
Alex, do
so
you recommend a resource where someone can go to, where you're not overwhelmed and you can just look for yourself at your own pace and not be overwhelmed by all the information if they're just looking for information to vote in an educated way?
yes, I have few resources for you. Actnow.org, that's aactnow.org. So it's two A's.
Uh-huh.
That one tells you all about the voting and gives you some good research data, a lot of polls. And I would say it is not leaning one side or the other.
Okay, that's great.
And then you have apiavote.org. One other resource that I found is carnegie.org. Those three resources, they tell you about the voting rights and they tell you why your vote matters and tells you what's on the ballot, tells you what kind of impact you can have, and tells you, all these different data pulls from previous voting, and they project what's going to happen in the next elections and why you should go out and vote, right? They're encouraging people, especially young people, minorities, to go out to the polls and make that difference, because young voters usually vote in like single digit percentages. Maybe 9% of young voters between 18 and 21 go out and vote. And that's very devastating because they're the future of this country. They should be making decisions for this country, but they feel discouraged, especially since the social media kind of took off. Everybody has an opinion, everybody's bashing everybody. There is a lot of polarization between people and communities, and I feel like that discourages a lot of people to go out and vote. But if you spend some time and actually do some research and see how voting can impact you and your community, I feel like people would change their minds. That's why there's a lot of activist groups that try to register people to vote. Now they try to make it available through, when you go get your license, right? You can register to vote. You can do it through mail. You can go to the post office. Like, they're trying to make this as available as possible to you. A lot of
I will
organizations are texting me like, hey, are you registered to vote? Are you ready? Do you need help? Like, it's very easy, especially with the online stuff. You just need your ID, your photo ID, and you can register. But there's some obstacles to the voting. Okay. So I have a specific case to bring up to you. At the beginning of this podcast, I said in 1964, the 24th Amendment allowed people to vote regardless of their tax status. So in 1965, the Congress passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And really, what that act did is try to discourage states from targeting Black communities, minorities, and low income communities. Voting rights are always at stake. People are always trying to take that away. I cannot stress this enough. whoever is in the office, historically, there was always a battle about voting rights because one party always wants to discourage the other party's voters, right? This Voting Rights Act of 1965 was challenged in 2013, and initially it got denied, but they appealed, and it ended up at the Supreme Court. In 2010, Shelby County, Alabama, filed suit asking a federal court in Washington, D.C. to declare Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act unconstitutional. And so Section 5 is a key part of the Voting Rights Act. It is a requiring certain jurisdictions with a history of discrimination to submit any proposed changes in voting procedures to the U.S. Department of Justice. What that means is that if the states are trying to change any procedures to the voting in their state, they have to submit it to the Department of Justice or a federal district court in DC, and before it goes into effect, right, to ensure that the changes would not harm minority votes.
Okay.
However, because the case made it to the Supreme Court ruled that the coverage formula in this section of the Voting Rights Act was unconstitutional because they said it was based on an old formula. They said that they made the Section 5 unconstitutional and opened up to the legislators, right, to the Congress, to enact a new coverage formula. So invited Congress to make pretty much a new Voting Rights Act. However, because this happened in 2013 when President Obama was in the office, and after Obama left, Donald Trump came, and we already know how that ended up. He tried to take away a lot of the voting rights, and he claimed fraud to an election when Joe Biden won. So there is a lot of stuff that happened, right, since 2013.
A lot of stuff.
When Joe Biden became president in 2020, he was trying to fix this situation. And in 2021, his Congress, the Democratic side of Congress, tried to enact John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Unfortunately, because the House and the Senate were not exclusively Democratic, the law or the legislation only passed in the House, but it did not pass the Senate. And so,
well, what is that, the John Lewis Act?
So the John Lewis Act is supposed to fix some of the stuff the Supreme Court took away in the ruling in 2013, right, for the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Pretty much, it would restore and strengthen parts of the Voting Rights Act, most notably the requirement for certain jurisdictions to seek federal approval before enacting certain changes to their voting laws. They would have to, the states that are trying to make the changes, they would actually have to get approved and notify the voters before they make any type of changes.
Yeah.
That still hasn't happened, and we currently don't have a good Voting Rights Act. And so I'm gonna read something that's very important, what I found very important to this whole situation, right, about voting. And I hope this shows like why voting is important to everybody, but especially minorities, Black voters, and women. Since the Supreme Court ruling allowed many states to begin putting in the new restriction laws regarding the right to vote, several states responded to this, okay? Notably, North Carolina passed HB 589, a bill which put in a strict photo ID requirement, eliminated same-day voting registration, and shortened the early voting period, among other restrictive policies. One policy in particular limited early voting on Sundays, which North Carolina admitted in court was because counties that offered it were likely to have higher Black populations.
Oh.
So this really paints the picture that
it's blatant.
Very blatantly racist, okay? And that's why it is very important that we pass this act, John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Wow.
But since we don't have it, I feel like now it's an opportunity to stress why is it important to go out and vote, right? Because your vote can change this, because your vote is going to go towards the lawmakers and legislators who are going to make this change. So if you're concerned with voting rights and you think this is not right, you should do your research and see who in your community aligns with those, morals that you have. Also do a research on like which president or presidential nominee, where do they stand on the voting rights, right? Because that's also important. If the House and the Senate are going to introduce a bill, the president is going to have to sign it. And if the president is not interested in the voting rights, he can veto it. So that's why it's important to do the research and know who you should be voting for, right? I cannot tell you that. That has to
Now,
be you.
now those resources that you mentioned before, would they have this type of information, like a breakdown of what the candidates support and don't support, and just what their agendas are?
No, but they can probably give you better information. Those websites are nationally recognized. They will give you like a broad picture of Republican causes and Democratic causes, but they will
Uh-huh.
not do a breakdown of your state legislators. But if you go on your state website or if you Google your representatives, you can see on their website. So each representative and senator has a website, and you can see where they stand, on a lot of issues, not just voting. You can see where they stand on abortion issues, LGBTQ issues, immigration, defense budget, right? Those are the hot topics that we have been discussing in the news, for the last few years. And we've seen with, Roe v. Wade, which was the abortion
Oh yeah.
right that got struck down by the Supreme Court. That was a direct impact of the voters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So the voters elected Donald Trump, who was a Republican. He appointed two judges to the Supreme Court. The Republican candidates and presidents, they historically always appoint more conservative judges, and Democrats appoint more liberal. Because Trump appointed two conservative judges, the court became more conservative. So there is 9 judges on the Supreme Court, and it is 6-3. So there's 6 conservative judges.
Yeah, that's a big imbalance.
Exactly. And because of that, even though Joe Biden, was elected in 2020 and he's a Democratic president, there was enough of Republican, I should say, or conservative judges who struck down Roe v. Wade. And that's how we ended
Wow.
up in the mess that is the abortion rights. But that all is the impact of the voters.
It's all connected.
Yes, it is. It's like a full circle, right? So you go out to the polls and you vote for your legislators, your representatives, your state, and then those state representatives represent you in the House or the Senate. And then they make decisions not just for your state, but for everything else. They make federal laws and they make these decisions or these cases to be heard in the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court, as the highest court in the United States, makes decisions that also become law.
Okay. I mean, as someone who is not used to all of this, I'm trying to figure out a game plan for myself. And I feel like the best thing to do is to start with maybe Googling your local elections, or, your next elections, and start breaking down, who you're going to be choosing basically when you're going there to vote. And by maybe taking that piece and then researching that, the candidates, you'll go in informed, and then every election you can kind of prepare yourself.
Yes, that is a good start, I would say. So, finding out who is running in your local elections
Yep.
is step number one, because you will see if you align with any of those candidates. And then from there, you can expand and see, okay, well, let's say I align more with the Republican Party. And if I'm going to vote for, Republican representative for my state, then let me see where is the presidential candidate standing, right? So you will have a Republican candidate and a Democratic candidate. I would see where do they stand on these issues that concern me, such as abortion, immigration, LGBTQ rights, whatever the case may
The
be.
big ones.
Yes, so exactly. Whatever concerns you, see where they stand on. And that's how you can make a decision. And sometimes you might get a more conservative Republican than you deem yourself to be, because they do have like extreme conservatives and then moderate conservatives. So if
Mm-hmm.
you align with moderate conservatives, then you probably will not want to vote for an extreme conservative candidate. And then you might want to explore to see, okay, well, let me see how does the other party deal with these issues that I'm concerned with. And if you align more with the Democratic candidate, then that should be your choice.
Fun fact, today I had to Google what GOP stood for because I knew we were going to be having this. And, I keep hearing that, over and over, and I never took the time to, what does GOP stand for? What does it represent? It means the good old party, and it's indicative of the Republicans. And
Yeah,
I mean, sounds really bad, but I did not know that.
I know. I feel like a lot of people don't know that. But Alan actually Googled it probably a few months ago, and he was pretty upset that GOP stands for good old party.
I don't blame him. Me too. I'm like, what the, oh my God, I need to. I mean, but this is representative of, how much there is to be learned about politics in general. And you hear these things over and over, and you take the time to start to figure out what they stand for. And you're like, wow, oh my gosh, now that makes sense. Every time they're referring to it, I know exactly who and what they're referring to. It's empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowledge is empowering, especially when it comes to critical issues such as voting and politics. Politics, yes, they're very polarized and far away from true politics, I have to say. But there still are politics. We live here, and these people make decisions that affect us. And we should not only know what they stand for, but we should also know enough so we can hold them accountable.
Right? Because, okay, let's say you don't vote. What happens then? What are the consequences then, Alex?
The consequences of not voting they're very broad. Okay, a lot of people that I talk to on social media or like read their comments or something, they complain a lot about the state of the country right now, right? The inflation and immigration, and we are having a couple of wars happening overseas that we're actively funding, and people get upset. But I always ask one question: well, did you vote? And if they say no, well, then you really don't have the right to complain, okay?
Hmm.
You didn't go out and exercise your right to have your voice heard and make that decision for yourself, right? Because, like you said, it's an empowering thing to know, but it's also very empowering to go out and vote because you're trying to make a change for yourself and for your family, your community, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So even if your candidate doesn't win, at least you got out and exercised your right. And it is still very empowering to know that
Right.
you did something
Yeah.
to make a change,
You
right?
made
Because
the
your
effort.
vote, exactly, and your vote still counts and your voice was heard. Your candidate just didn't win, right?
Yeah.
But you can complain about the situation in the country and then not exercise the right and go out and vote.
Right. I mean, it's easy to disengage because it's overwhelming, right? Because if you
Absolutely.
are someone like me and you just haven't been following and you want to stay in your bubble and not absorb all that noise, right? That it's easy to disengage. But then you can't ignore everything that's happening around you. I mean, it's going to infiltrate your bubble. The laws that are put into place or reversed, and policies and taxes, all of that will affect you. You are not immune to those decisions.
Yes. We are unfortunately not in a good place to be detached from politics because there is just so much happening in the country and in the world, and a lot of people are displeased. We have the power to make that change and have our voices heard, right? But if we're not doing our part, then we cannot expect other people to do their part.
Right.
And you said something about education. I want to give you another statistic. Unfortunately, this is a lot about numbers. Well, fortunately for me, I like numbers.
She's an accountant, and this is where that comes in.
I'm going to give you some statistics on who actually goes out and vote. And I want you to think about what I told you before about, historically how other races were not allowed to vote, women were not allowed to vote, and just hear this statistic out. This is from the 2020 elections, okay? So it says 3/4 of voters, 75% were white, non Hispanic adults. Hispanic adults and Black, non Hispanic adults each made up to 9% of voters, but
Wow.
slightly larger shares of non voters, 18 and 50% respectively. Asian Americans made up 3% of voters. And there says there are also large educational and income differences between voters and non voters. Adults with a college degree made up 43% of voters in 2022, but only 25% of non voters. Those without a college degree made up 56% of voters, but 74% of non voters. One, I made a mistake and I said it was from 2020, but it was from 2022. I just think about this, okay? The 3/4 of voters were white, non Hispanic adults. That's 75% of people that went out to vote, they were white,
Yep.
okay? Because white people historically have not struggled to go out and vote, they exercise their right more than anybody else in this country. The voters that usually have been, discouraged to go out to the polls, like Hispanic and Black voters, Asian Americans, they literally make up not even, 15% of our voters. And that is a staggering statistics because even though we have, better voting rights now in 2023, we are still seeing the disparity in, minorities going out or non-white voters going out to vote. That is huge, right?
They have no representation.
They don't have representation, and I feel like they're also discouraged. Recently, in the last couple of years, we have seen that the Congress has become more diverse because usually they're white old men. There is no better way to say this. Everybody knows this.
Uh,
White old men are running our politics. They're running Washington D.C. And since 2016, and we've seen it in 2020 again, Congress is trying to be, the voters is really, they're making the change, they're voting in. We had like the first open LGBTQ person, we had most African American women voted in, we had Native Americans voted in. So all that is the result of the voting, right? The voters went out to the polls and they wanted that representation and they voted these people in. So that's why it is very important that, non-white voters also go out and vote, because the more they vote, the more representation they're going to have. So if
right.
they don't vote, they will have no representation.
Right.
But the reason why I started reading this statistic is because the adults with a college degree made up 43% of voters and only 25% of non-voters. But the people without a college degree made up 56% of voters, but 74% of non-voters. That means that 74% of people who don't have a college degree did not vote. They had the right to vote and they choose not to.
Yeah.
And education is directly related to the voting rights and what we talked about. How do we do research? How do we find out stuff? What are our resources? Because some people who don't have a college degree might be living in low-income communities. They might be living in minority communities, Black or Hispanic, Asian American communities. And so they might not have the resources not only to get a college degree, but they also don't have resources to go out and vote. That directly impacts them, because if they are concerned with high admission fees to colleges, if they went out and voted to people who want to make college free, they can make an impact to their community. You see, there it's like a ripple effect,
Yeah,
right?
that's just one
So
example. Yeah.
voting absolutely affects every single aspect of your life. If you are concerned with wages, voting also impacts your job, because if you are electing people who are against raising the minimum wage, it will affect your job, because the higher the minimum wage is, even if you're now working on a minimum wage, you have a higher chance of getting a raise. Everything is impacted by literally you going out to the poll and voting.
There's no confusion about it, Alex. When you lay it all out, there's no alternative. You have to take action. You can't hear all this and not take action about it.
So, did I encourage you to go out and vote, Claudia?
I actually am. I actually heard this interview with Sylvia Bush the other day. She's a big activist, and she was talking about this organization. It's called I'm a Voter, and she makes it really easy for people like me because she talked about all you have to do is text the word voter to 26797. So 26797, and you just text the word voter. And what that does, it checks to see if you're registered. Because I honestly do, I know I was registered at a time. I do not recall if I still am registered. I have no idea. It's been too long. So it checks for you, and it allows you to re-register if you aren't. And then it sends you the address of where you are allowed to vote, actually. So it does all the work for you, and you could just do it from your smartphone. So, I mean, it doesn't even need to be a smartphone. It's just a text message. So it doesn't get easier than that for me. I mean, if you can't text, after hearing all this and you need to get involved and take action, I mean, there's no hope for us. There's no hope for this country if we
Yeah,
can't take this little piece of action, take 2 minutes out of your day and do your duty.
that was actually a pretty good research. I'm pretty impressed, because
Thank you. Thank you.
usually I have to bully you into just getting to talk to you about voting. So that's pretty good. What is the number again, Claudia?
It is 26797. I tested it out myself and it works. It's a chat bot that kind of helps you along with it, but it's super simple. And we as a nation need to start taking control of our country. And it's in a state right now. Nobody seems happy with where we're at. So let's make a change about it.
I 100% agree. That's a good call to action, because voting is not just your constitutional right, but it is becoming to be an existential one. So we really have to go out and vote and make our voice heard. It is more important now than ever.
Makes me want to go vote right now. Bet you never thought you'd hear me say
Yeah,
that.
I am pretty impressed.
Well, Alex, this topic was much more exciting than the war topic that we covered, but, we got to talk about everything, right?
I agree. I think our last topic brought me down a little bit, and I hope our vibe is different in this episode.
Oh, this vibe is different. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
We're trying to bring everybody up and, get some hope for our country. So this is a good one.
Yeah, I like this topic.
And we have lots more to cover. So stick with us.
Well, Claudia, this was actually a topic you chose. and I am very grateful for that. This was really good. I actually learned some stuff too. I mean, I knew that you should go out and vote and stuff, but I didn't know a lot about the Voting Rights Act, and so I learned some stuff as well.
You nerded out on this one.
I 100% did.
Yep, you
I
love
was
it.
very passionate about it. I was shouting out to Alan, actually, stuff that I was learning as I was a little upset, but also like glad that I learned this, and made me feel more empowered that I actually go out and vote, and getting ready for the next election, which is the presidential election in 2024.
I feel the
That
same.
is-
I feel empowered. I feel like I want to start researching right now. I've already got my text registration going, so I hope that people take away from this and do the same, or at least that you felt like you learned something today and you have a better understanding about how to vote and why it's important. And as always, if you have more questions that we didn't cover, I didn't ask, you are welcome to email nyabpodcast@gmail.com. Of course, that stands for Not Your Average Breakdown Podcast @gmail.com. And we would love to hear from you.
And we actually have an Instagram account. It is the same as our email, NYAB Podcast.
Check
Yeah.
it out, add us, follow us, tell your friends. We want to get this thing going.
Yes, absolutely. And if you do have any questions that came out of this episode that you would like us to cover, please let us know. We will cover as much topic that we can. So if you do want to learn more about anything related to voting or politics, please let us know. I will be more than happy to do the research.
We're going to cover it all. All right, everybody, we're out. Thank you for sticking with us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks, Claudia, for this topic.